you a bit of a storm chaser? Do you like watching the clouds roll in and seeing the drama of nature unfold? Just a quick look on social media and you can see that images of clouds, lightning, storm fronts and the ocean's majesty are just clickbait. They go off when we always share your photos and videos when you're out and about in the regions on our ABC Mid-North Coast and Coast Coast Facebook pages. We were checking out the storms yesterday on Facebook and Instagram and came across Alex McNaught's photos, a Port Macquarie-based photographer, and we thought we'd touch base with him, find out how he does it and how he has turned it into a career. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Larissa. We've got a very fine sunny day today and no storms in sight.
No storms in sight. Do you still take photos of the ocean and the nature when it is sunny?
Yes, absolutely. I have a business that sells my photography, and sometimes even the most straightforward in photographic terms images are quite popular, and motel owners, like to put these happy, colourful images up for, their walls and show everything, that's beautiful on a fine sunny day. It doesn't have to be dark or stormy or any kind of specific, art sort of focus. It's plain, simple sun, and why don't we all go out and enjoy it?
Of course, we've got such a great spot here on the Coffs and Mid-North Coast regions to take wonderful photos in rural areas, regional areas, by the water. It's such a great spot. Alex, what first drew you to photography in the beginning?
Well, my core original passion was geography, which is, the landscape and the dissection and understanding of the landscape. And from that, beginning, I evolved into a more technical study of that at university with a geophysics degree, which is a highly mathematical and scientific approach to finding things. And photography, I find, is the third part of that pie in terms of its being a visual study of the landscape. So it's evolved as part of me for as long as I can remember.
And now you've turned it into a wonderful career. What do you have to keep in mind when you go out and photograph? Like, what makes a good photo?
It's a very hard answer to give because you have so many variables and so many things that are going on in an image. But surprisingly, the first thing you've got to understand is, why am I even taking this photo? What is it about this that strikes me to bring up a device and press a button? It's a little bit more than that, but that's it in its essence. And in the case of what you're led in with storms, you'll have the drama of lightning or a fantastic cloud formation and so on. But it's also a little bit more than that when you look into it. If you just took a photo of a cloud, it's not much. But if you bring back the ground in relation to that, or things that people can relate to, you can understand the size, the extent, and so on. And that's what I find so fascinating about, Port Macquarie as a location, and particularly with drone technology, in that you can then take an iconic location such as Tacking Point Lighthouse, go out to sea and look back, and then you can relate all the elements together. So what goes into making that an appealing photo is, in fact, all those elements, coming together. So you don't just sort of grab a happy snap. You think about the whole thing in context, and that's comes naturally to some people. That comes as part of an evolutionary process to others. But when you sit back and look at the image, so this is what I find really pleasing about it.
You mentioned a couple of iconic spots to not just spot whales and things like that, like Tacking Point Lighthouse. You photograph all over Australia and even the world. But what are some iconic spots in the Mid-North Coast and Coffs Coast region that you love visiting and photographing?
I think there's quite a number of fascinating locations. Port Macquarie is just one. Southwest Rocks is another. Crescent Head is another. We're just studded with gems up and down the coast, and I think what people in other countries would flock to, because it's a small part of their world, but fantastic. Australia is blessed with hundreds and hundreds of kilometres in this region alone of fascinating beaches and headlands. We're spoilt for choice. We have so much to see and enjoy.
We do, and it's beautiful all year round, isn't it? Any season of the year, it's great to head along either the coast or inland, like you were saying, and there's always something to see and perhaps something new to see. Do you find you might visit the same spot regularly, but you always see something different when you photograph those places?
Absolutely. And Tacking Point Lighthouse is a case in point. I live only a mile away from it. And I visit it a number of times during the week after week, month after month. And you think, well, surely that's just the one spot. And, once you've taken half a dozen photos, that's it. No, it's far from it. And I think that delves into the deeper sort of fun aspect of photography. It never finishes, it never ends, it never gets old, because you can take it in different lighting and different combinations and different things happening around it. It might be two whales that are blowing, water spouts just off the lighthouse, so you look back at that, and you might even be lucky enough to get in a bit of a rainbow, in their blowout. And you might have a storm coming from one direction, or might be a storm coming, a storm going. There are just so many different variations on a theme, and so many different ways you can take an image. And then in particular with modern photography, where you post-process the image, so you edit it to bring out the elements that attracted you to take a photo in the first place. So it never stops. There's just so much to see and do. And you could be just in one location and you could have hundreds of variations in a year.
Every photo is different when all the elements add up in different ways. You mentioned whale watching and the spurts of the whales you've captured before. You do a bit of work with Orca and the National Parks and Wildlife Service, don't you?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. And that continues a lifelong habit of adding, my volunteer hours to one, role or another. And I've had that, my whole life. And when I moved to Port Macquarie and became involved in the scene, and when I, gathered the, good drones and everything else to use, I quickly became aware of the whale watching season. And Port Macquarie in particular is quite a strategic point up and down the coast, and you get a lot of traffic past in terms of the northerly and the southerly parts of the migration. So I'm in close contact with the whale watcher here, Lee Mansfield, who directs the boats onto for whale watching tours, and he's national coordinator for Orca for the rescues around Australia. And he and I have a great relationship. And whenever he sees something through his binoculars that might be an entanglement, for example, he gives me a call and I grab my gear and I rush down. And that means that, we can then together work and find the whale in the ocean. I fly out to it. I'm given authority to go close and everything else to get detailed photos. And those photos then passed on to Orca and national parks and for their rescue teams. And they can understand then what they're up against, the length of the rope, or how it's entangled, around which fin, and what buoys are there, and know what to expect so they can brief their rescue team so they're fully equipped, ready to go to assist the poor animal.
That's amazing. So your photography actually helps inform our local wildlife rescuers and onlookers of the condition these animals are in, like the whales.
Yeah, absolutely. Both animals that are in distress, but also for managing endangered populations. There is a east and west coast population of the southern right whale, and while there are quite healthy numbers over in the western side of the country, there's a separate and genetically distinct population on the east coast, which are quite low on numbers. And so I've been asked to be part of a volunteer citizen scientist program with National Parks. And the fact about southern right whales is that they have very distinct, unique markings, just like a fingerprint. So there's this white things called calisotes on the heads, and that identifies them as an individual. While Port Macquarie is at the very northern end of their typical range, they're more typically found, at Bateman's Bay and that kind of part of the world. Just recently we had a rare spot of them up at the northern end of the range, and I was being involved in their program. I said, I'll never see one because it's always down the south coast. But not so long ago, we had a fantastic rare combination of a mother and a whale, southern right whale and a calf, and doing breaching as well. And so with my newest drone, with a very powerful zoom lens, I was able to get down very quickly and launch off and get video footage from a long distance out while I flew out to them. And that footage has been very well received in national parks because it helps them identify these individuals, and it's fantastic sort of information for them to set and formulate policy and how to manage these animals and track their numbers and so on. It only comes from a whole program of people like myself who are up and down the coast and willing and able to volunteer their time and come down and get these images so we can build up a proper picture of the whole population.
It's a team effort, Alex. You're on the mid-north coast and Coffs Coast. How can we check out your photography on Facebook and Instagram and places like that?
Yeah, I keep a number of different channels. I've got a YouTube channel with a nice eclectic mix of behind the scenes, stuff that goes on with the photography, not just photography, but all the travels and everything else that I'm doing. Instagram, Facebook, and my website. So the main place to go would be to my website, which is rovingeye.com. It's got a dash between roving and I. If you go onto there, you'll see links to the Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. And people could find that quite interesting because I'm making quite a point of not just the photography, but the surrounding parts of photography, the travel, the behind the scenes. And increasingly, I'm doing a little bit of industrial photography too. So when I see a major industrial area that's right next to a piece of beauty, I'm capturing that as part of the whole picture. So I'm doing quite an extensive pushing of media of different types, and I put a lot of photos up on Google Maps, so 360-degree aerial shots and so on, for example.
Wow.
Just come back from the Whitsunday, so I've got a whole bunch of photos that capture both industry and beauty, and even those are putting up on Google Maps. That opens up the field to the potential viewers to the entire world. So I employ every single channel that is out there.
Yeah. Alex, thank you so much for coming on and giving us a bit of an insight into the wonderful work you're doing, not just capturing beautiful scenes in the environment and the landscape, but these photos are actually going towards helping nature and animal organisations like Orca and the National Parks and Wildlife Service keep an eye on our animals and make sure they're doing all right. It was lovely to chat to you this morning.
Thank you so much for your interest, and I hope through my photography people extend their appreciation for the beauty in nature and how we must protect it and value it. So thank you so much for your interest again.
Yeah, Alex McNaught, a local photographer from the Mid-North Coast, from Roving Eye Photography, giving us a bit of an insight into his career. He's turned it from a passion and a hobby into a career, and maybe it has inspired you to get out and about this long weekend. Maybe school holidays, take the kids, take the camera, try and capture some amazing photos.